Welcome to the Age of Fission radio show with your host, Lonnie Clark. Our dedication to living life joyfully allows us to confront the reality of unmitigated deception and political denial of the harm caused by nuclear and chemical contamination. We demand an end to corporate control of science and suppression of facts for political and financial gain. We are not assets on a balance sheet. We must honestly work together to remediate damage to benefit our planet and humanity. Remember, happiness is resistance, and love is greater than fear. Join the Age of Fission radio show on Spreaker.com. Search for Lonnie Clark for all our podcasted shows. Podcasts are also on YouTube at Nuts for Art, NUTZFORART. Thank you for being part of the solution. Good evening. This is Lonnie Clark with the Age of Fission radio show. I want to thank you for joining us. Today is May 23rd, 2019, and we are live tonight on KEPW 97.3 FM LP or www.kepw.org. Live streaming on the internet and playing live in Eugene, Oregon this evening at 11 o'clock. I'm actually pre-recording this for the live. It's not a live show, but the show plays tonight, so I guess that's somewhere in between. Tonight I wanted to bring you some stories that nobody really covers about nuclear contamination. I honestly could do this radio show 7 days a week because there is, frankly, just so much stuff to report on that never gets reported. I am part of an email chain from Donna Gilmore, who runs a website called SanOnofreeSafety.org, and I am sure many of my listeners know that the San Onofre nuclear power plant was closed down. I think it was 2016, 2 or 3 years ago now, and they have been figuring out what they're going to do with the waste. And this is a very interesting story. It's down in Orange County, California, down by San Clemente. Basically, Donna Gilmore started this when she found out about that the plant was closing down. And she made an effort to really dig in and become her own expert because she couldn't find anything on it that was out there. And Donna Gilmore is now quite a well-known person as an, quote, anti-nuke activist. But she has this website where she has discovered that the canisters that we use in the United States are woefully inadequate for the nuclear waste. The decision was made from her research. She has been in touch with the Union of Concerned Scientists. His name is Dave Lochbaum. And he's one of the people who recommended that the NRC purchase these thin-walled canisters because they're not as heavy to move. They are, however, quite dangerous because they leak after 20 years. So you can go to San Onofre Safety. If we have enough time, the reason I'm giving you this background is this week an article came out that I got through her channel, and it was an article written on ProPublica. And I'm going to read it to you because it will shock the socks off of you and see exactly why the nuclear industry continues to lie to us and take advantage of the fact that people don't know about this. They don't hear about it, and when they do hear about it, they actually really don't want to know about it. So not many people actually pay attention to this. What's the date of this article? Let me see if I can find a date on it. It's in ProPublica, and it was dated May 23rd, so it's a brand new story that came out today. Listen to this title. It's shocking. A false answer, a big political connection, and $260 million in tax breaks. A company that won the second largest tax break in New Jersey history gave a false answer about being prohibited from working with a federal agency in a sworn statement made to win $260 million in taxpayer assistance for a new plant in Camden. A review by WNYC and ProPublica found that Holtec International CEO Chris Singh responded no on certified forms submitted to the state in 2014 that asked if the applicant had ever been barred from doing business with a state or federal agency. The forms were submitted to the New Jersey Economic Development Authority as part of the company's successful application for tax breaks. In fact, the international nuclear parts manufacturer was caught up in a contracting investigation at the federally owned Tennessee Valley Authority. In 2010, Holtec, this is the name of the company, was barred for 60 days from doing any federal business and paid a $2 million administrative fine to the TVA, according to an agency report. Holtec's debarment marked the first time that the agency had taken such action against a contractor. Now that must have been pretty serious. I've never heard of them taking any action against a contractor. A TVA official pleaded guilty in the U.S. District Court of Alabama for knowingly and willfully making a false statement on a financial disclosure form, according to the Department of Justice press release from 2007. 12 years ago. The official failed to disclose a payment from a contractor that originated with Holtec, the court document said. Holtec later went on to rebuild its relationship with the TVA, and it secured additional contracts to supply casks that store spent nuclear fuel. These are these half-inch thick containers that we have now all over the place in our country. That is what were mostly being used. 5 days after WNYC and ProPublica contacted Holtec seeking comment about its incorrect answer on the application, an attorney representing the firm sent a letter asking the EDA to correct Singh's answer in the 2014 application. So 7 years later, you can correct your lies. Kevin Sheehan, an attorney for the Parker K law firm, which represented Holtec in its application for tax break, wrote to the agency that the mistake was inadvertent. These people are disgusting. Joy Russell, Holtec Senior Vice President of Business Development and Communication, in an emailed statement, called the incorrect answer an oversight by Singh. Holtec's company ethics policy, which is included in a court filing, warns employees to use great care in signing documents filed with the government officials that could subject the company or employee to legal problems. The application process for state tax breaks is supposed to include a rigorous review by EDA officials on all statements submitted by a company. In Holtec's case, emails recently released to WNYC and ProPublica show that the staff went back to the company to clarify questions about the company's financial calculations and raised concern that Singh was late in filing required certifications as the date approached for review of the EDA application. This is infuriating. The EDA, in a statement, said the tax break law gave it the authority to take back tax credits, but the agency stopped short of saying how it might proceed against Holtec. In the case of a representation in an application that is false, i.e., a lie, misleading, or inaccurate in any material respect, the NJEDA could declare a default, potentially resulting in termination of the agreement and or recapture of the tax credit, according to the EDA spokeswoman, Virginia Pellerin. The board approved Holtec's application in July 14th in a 10-0 vote, with 2 board members abstaining. Wow. It is unclear what steps the agency would have taken if Singh had answered truthfully, or if Singh's false answer had been discovered during the staff review. Singh's sworn statement were part of a checklist in which the company must attest that it faced no criminal convictions or other legal issues. Singh checked no to all of the questions. Holtec's new factory in Camden is part of the resurgence for the poverty, listen to the way they write this, for the poverty-stricken city pushed by South Jersey Democratic boss George E. Norcross III, who is an unpaid member of Holtec's board. Are you kidding me? Norcross's brother, Philip, is managing partner at the law firm that represented the company in its EDA application, Parker McKay. Sheehan worked closely with the Philip Norcross on the Holtec matter, according to emails obtained by WNYC and ProPublica. The law firm's work on behalf of several Camden projects is now under scrutiny. Tim Lazura, the former president and chief operating officer of the EDA, declined to be interviewed. I'm sure he did, the rat. The emails show Lazura closely monitored the Holtec application, presiding over meetings and phone calls between the agency and company representatives. Governor Phil Murphy has appointed a task force to investigate the state tax break program. Its lead lawyer said a misrepresentation on an application could result in the cancellation of the tax break. First of all, the EDA can suspend the grant pending the investigation, said Jim Walden, special counsel of the task force. He declined to comment on the Holtec application specifically, but agreed to discuss how the task force is handling problems with its application in general. I don't know about you guys, but this is just infuriating. You know what, really, let me share with you what the Holtec's problem is. I am going to go to Donna Gilmore's webpage. She has a lot of really good information about the truth about these canisters. Holtec thin canister systems, this is what she says on her flyer to hand out. You can go to her webpage. And it's called sanonofresafety.org. And then you go to where? You go to nuclear waste details. You can go to handouts. There's handouts that you can get if you are interested in sharing information with people. So this is what Donna has found out and discovered, and frankly has caused a huge wave of ripple effects within the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, because they were just passing all this information by, and they knew it, but they are downplaying the importance of it. So this is her first bullet point. The NRC Special Inspection Reports said Edison and Holtec hid the fact. This is about San Onofre's safety, the safety out of the San Onofre nuclear power plant, and it is run by Southern California Edison. Reports said that Edison and Holtec hid the facts. The walls are all of thin wall canisters are damaged or gouged upon downloading. Edison damaged 29 canisters so far, and they plan to damage 43 more if the NRC approves this. The NRC has not allowed more thin wall canisters because of the damage to the canister from the poorly designed Holtec canister downloading system that lacks precision engineering. The only reason they stopped allowing these thin wall canisters was because of the work of Donna Gilmore. And this is what I mean when we act on what we think is the right thing for us. Donna Gilmore was just like us. She was a retiree who was a controller for the state of California. And she retired down to San Clemente, to her dream home. And within a year of living there, it was discovered that the San Onofre nuclear power plant, Edison operator, Southern California Edison, planned on putting in an inadequate part when it changed out to refuel. And a whistleblower contacted Senator Boxer's office and gave them information. They had hearings, congressional hearings, which actually resulted in the early closure of the San Onofre nuclear power plant. And then they had to figure out what they're going to do with these canisters, because they had over 100 canisters on site, being stored on site, since now the Waste Project Power Plant, the WIPP, Waste Isolation Project Plant in New Mexico, the waste can't go there anymore because that facility had collapses. It's an underground storage facility, and the walls have collapsed, and it's basically inoperable. They just now started resending things down there, but it's still very unsafe. So the NRC has basically told every single nuclear power facility in the country to leave their waste on site. So when San Onofre shut down, and Donna Gilmore got involved with discovering, like, okay, let's look at this waste. What are we going to do about it? She discovered that we store our nuclear waste at most of our facilities in canisters that are 3/8 of an inch thick. Or not, 3/8 to a half an inch thick. So it's barely a half an inch thick. And then what they do is they put this concrete dome over it that has little vents at the top and at the bottom, and it's permanently placed inside there. And so you can't inspect the canisters. You can't tell. This is what they say. The canisters get damaged for downloading. That's what it means. So when they download them, they put the canisters inside these concrete walls because it's highly radioactive. So when it gets placed in there, they scratch it up because it's so heavy, and it has to go into this big concrete thing, and it gouges it, literally gouges it. So we have canisters that are being gouged. And what they discovered is if you have any type of a bing or a ding in this material, because the radioactivity is so hot, they know that it is going to leak after 20 years. It is going to leak. Now, this is at every nuclear power facility in our country, folks. This is why this story about Holtec blew me away. Because they know they're criminals. They know exactly what they're doing. They know exactly how inadequate their products really are. Let me see if I can find that thing again. Okay. The NRC is still investigating, but they know even microscopic cracks can cause these thin wall canisters, only 5 inches thick, to fail in the short term. Edison admits each canister holds roughly about the radioactive particles released from the 1986 Chernobyl nuclear disaster. So every single one of these canisters has as much radioactive particles as Chernobyl. And it's sitting right on the edge of the Pacific Ocean, folks, right on top of the San Andreas Fault. It is a complete shock, to be honest. This is where I start cussing, because to me it's almost like they're doing it intentionally. So this is about, again, down there, aging management is a con game where the NRC and Edison pretend they can inspect and repair these canisters, quote, sometime in the future, unquote. They can do neither. They cannot inspect, nor can they repair these canisters. They cannot find cracks with a camera. They cannot repair the canisters. And that is according to the president of Holtec. There's actually a YouTube video on this if you're interested. So this is the thing that what we really need is we need to ditch these Holtec canisters and get the thick ones. In the rest of the world, the United States is actually the only country on the planet that does this too. It's insane. The rest of the world that has nuclear power facilities, they store their nuclear waste in 10 inches to 19.75 inch thick casks. We store them in 1/2 inch to 5/8 inches. 5/8 inches is the largest. So these thick casks, they won't crack. You can repair them. You can replace seals. You have the ability to inspect them inside and out. You can monitor the system to prevent the leaks. They get certification. They have defense and depth redundancy. They store it in a concrete building. So they basically have this thick cast, and then they build a concrete building around it. Gamma and neutron protection. So in order to get gamma and neutron protection in the thin canisters, this is an interesting little factoid, they have to overpack the waste inside the canisters. They literally have to put more in there than what the manufacturer recommends. Transportation without an additional cask. The thick cask can do that, the thin ones cannot. So why in the world is the United States filling up its nuclear waste in casks that we cannot inspect? It's kind of beyond comprehension that we are participating in that. I honestly don't know what they're thinking when they even think about it. It kind of blows me away. This is one of the things that people don't actually really think about when they think about nuclear power plants and closing them down. Like, we have several closed down nuclear power plants in this country. One of them is sitting on the Great Lakes, actually. There was some articles a few weeks ago about it. And it was talking about the nuclear waste sitting right on the Great Lakes. It's Zion Nuclear Power Plant that's been closed down. I personally do know some children that have been born very, very close to that place that have learning disabilities. Now, is it related? I don't know, but I think it was. Their mother and their father, when I mentioned it, kind of got horrified. You know, they didn't want to even think about it, but then again, when they left from there, they went to go live in Colorado, where there's actually even more nuclear contamination. So this is the interesting part. When you start listening to this radio show, you listen to these stories that I read to you. I've actually decided very recently I'm going to start calling up people and doing interviews again. I have taken a hiatus for at least a year interviewing anybody new. But I think it's about time we start listening again. If I'm going to do the radio show, I'm going to get real people that are active and out there talking about how they're spending their lives fighting an uphill battle. And I think that's why I got worn out, because these are people that go to work day after day after day and are fighting a battle that we frankly have already lost, right? And this is why Charlotte was very adamant that we have to do happy shows, because we want to bring our vibration up, right? So this is one of the things that I've been learning about, is what we're getting in our lives is what vibrationally we have been attracting. It's attraction, right? So we attract this. So there are lessons in all of this that we are bound to learn from, because we have them in our lives already. I mean, we've been bombed since, what is it, the 50s, the 40s? This week, there was an article that came out. Most people have seen it. It's on the Googles and in the news about the dome out there near the Marshall Islands that's crumbling. What's shocking about that, quote, news, is that it's not news. It's been crumbling for a long time, 10 years. I know Thaston Ricklin, he and I talked about it 5-6 years ago, that it's literally crumbling. And the United States told the Marshallese 5 or 6 years ago, when it was currently discovered, that you're on your own. We've paid you enough money. We're not helping you fix it. You've had plenty of time to figure out what you're going to do with it, so you're on your own. Even though the United States brought the waste to them, the Marshallese are on their own. So it does really make you spit nails to realize that we're not such the good guys, you know. We always have this idea that America's been the good people, and I'm telling you, the nuclear industry is insidious. It has seriously caused some serious harm. And it's going to continue to cause some serious harm. So that's just how it's going to be. But it doesn't have to destroy everything, and it doesn't have to change our joy for living. You know, we get to choose how we live vibrationally. We get to choose whether we want to focus on the negative past or vision a way forward, right? The reason I bring you these stories, Charlotte and I have this conversation every time I tell her I'm going to be reporting on nuclear waste, and because there's just story week after week. If you look on the internet, you can find a nuclear waste problem near you, because it's everywhere, folks. Charlotte Anthony, who many of you here in Eugene, Oregon know. She helped start, and it was her idea to do the Victory Gardens for All. And her idea is that we just need to talk about the positive things, about getting people out there. And my idea with this show is to inspire people to go by their gut and do what you feel prompted to do, even though you're not an expert at it, even though you don't have all the answers. If you feel a passion about a specific topic, dig in and get active in it in some way, because we really need every single adult to manifest their true path. I think that's how we're going to save our planet. I think this is, we're kind of in the fight for our lives, literally, in terms of our dedication to love. I personally think that the karmic energy of Gaia is love, and I think that's what we offer the universe is love. That's why I say love is greater than fear and happiness is resistance, because I think that we can manifest all of that. So I want to thank everybody who's listening to us here on kepw.org, 97.3 FM LP in Eugene, Oregon. It is a real pleasure to have this audience, this local audience, listen to my radio show. I think many people are not aware of it, like I wasn't. And there's probably a lot of people who listen to this show that know way more than I do. So I'm going to ask anyone out there who hears this show, if you have any input or you have any direction that you'd like me to take, or if you'd like to be interviewed, if you know more about a topic that I'm talking about than I do, which is probably pretty easy to say. If you've heard my show, you can know that I'm an expert at being a human being. That's about it. I guess I'm a tax expert. I'm a tax resolution specialist by trade. By avocation, I cannot stop thinking about this nuclear waste. I am just dumbfounded, to be honest. It freaks me out. I honestly had no idea that our government was not handling it correctly. I had no idea that as a child I was bombarded with nuclear contamination living and being raised in Los Angeles. I had no idea that out by Simi Valley, where Magic Mountain is right around the corner from the Santa Susana Field Lab, which has had 8 nuclear meltdowns, all of which have been put out into the atmosphere without anybody being told. I mean, it is outrageous the number of environmental crimes that have been perpetrated by the nuclear industry that nobody is even allowed to talk about. Any editor in a newsroom, any journalist on a regular newspaper, anywhere, even the Eugene Weekly, they soft pedal nuclear contamination all over the place. Otherwise, it would be one of their hot topics, trying to close down the Columbia Generating Station, which needs to be shut down yesterday. And try to go to the water board meetings and demand that we don't buy the nuclear contamination from the Columbia Generating Station. We're required here in Eugene, Oregon to buy 4% of nuclear power for the Columbia Generating Station. We are required, unless we get enough of the population to call up the water board and say, hey, we don't want it. Then they can vote. They can say, our constituents do not want to have nuclear power, so we're not going to have it. That's the only way we're going to stop them. When they create these nuclear power facilities, the way they do this is they create consortiums. Ours happens to be quite complicated. I think there are 48 other power facilities involved in getting nuclear power from the Columbia Generating Station. It's a consortium. So you have to have the vote of every single one of those power facilities to shut down the Columbia Generating Station, unless it has a nuclear meltdown. And if it has a nuclear meltdown, we're going to be really in a bad place. If we have even a small nuclear meltdown at the Columbia Generating Station is going to cause what I call the proximity factor will come in place. All of the waste material at Hanford, all the sites that need to be managed on a daily basis, all the projects that they're working on, all the stuff that cannot be left alone for more than 72 hours, it will all have to be abandoned for 2 weeks. There is a great possibility of spontaneous fires combusting from some of those tanks and just basically hideous dump sites. So one of those tanks could explode. We could have a 700,000 a year nuclear cloud coming into the northern hemisphere. It's completely ridiculous that we keep the Columbia Generating Station open. And, by the way, they have Holtec canisters. You know, you can go to Donna Gilmore's website at sanonofresafety.org and you can find some handouts that tell you exactly where the casks are. You know what I mean? And which type of casks that they have. Let me see if I can find this page for you on her website, because it's a pretty interesting. I've given it away, the cost of nuclear power. You go to her drop-down site and health risks. Listen to what she has on her webpage. This is such great work. She has something called issues. CPUC San Onofre, safety issue summary, earthquake risk, radiation monitoring, cost of nuclear power, safety allegations, once through cooling, emergency resources, emergency plan, which most nuclear power plants don't have an emergency plan. I know that most nuclear power facilities do not even have like a evacuation for the area. Health risks, NRC problems, tsunami risk, GAO audits, Fukushima, steam generators, U.S. Senate NRC oversight, and California Safety Commission. That's just under her issues tabs. So it's very, honestly, it's very interesting that we have information that we can find that tells us how unsafe all these things are. And it's like, to be honest, it reminds me of what's going on in the White House right now. I mean, maybe this is really what it's all about, attraction, attraction, attraction. It's this whole idea of Trump says something and according to him it's true, but he's just nothing but a liar and a traitor in my view. You know what I mean? Like he's openly defying everything that the United States said that it was, because they have broken the rules and ignored them so often internally at the federal level that he figures, well, what's the difference? Why can't I break these laws? Because everybody else is doing it. He's just doing it in the open. It's just, I don't know. I personally, right now, I have been, I don't know, going kind of berserk because I think he needs to be impeached. I think that we have never seen a real reason to have impeachment faster than this. So it's kind of like these casks. How can we have a nuclear regulatory commission that certifies casks that they know will leak in 20 years? Here, I found it. That's why I was stumbling, you guys. I'm sorry for that. I wanted to find this handout that she has on her webpage, and you have to scroll down. You go under Holtec on one of the drop-down pages, and you scroll way down, and there is a thing that you can click on, and it's called U.S. Commercial Spent Canister Fuels. It's the inventory, U.S. inventory, spent fuel inventory. So let us go to the Columbia Generating Station and see which kind of canisters we have here. Now, you know, in 2003, they shut down the Trojan, right? But Trojan still has nuclear waste in Oregon. And there are 13 canisters. Let's see. There are a total of 29 canisters at Trojan ISFI, there's 13, there are 29 canisters at the Holtec canisters there, and 29 of them, 24 of them, let me see. 24 of them are bolted. They're only bolted 10 inches thick. So let's see. Welded is the thin lid canisters and the bolted the thick canisters. So what do we have? Oh my goodness. We have the thin canisters in Oregon at Trojan, folks. That's bad news for us because that's right at the mouth of the Columbia River. There's 29 that were in there in 2003 and then 5 more. Total assemblies in each canister is 24. So we have 34 canisters that are all thin wall canisters. And they are already 13 years old in 2016, which means 2019, they're 1, 2, 3, 4 years old. So they're 17 years old and they're known to crack at 20 years. So this is not a good scene for us up there. So what are we going to do here in in Oregon at the Trojan? We're talking about Trojan, not even the Columbia Generating Station, which I'm still looking for on this list of all of these 123 nuclear power plants that we have in this country. I'm blown away by the level of arrogance and disregard for human life. So there are still nuclear canisters up there at Trojan, even though that nuclear facility is closed down. There's 34 canisters. That's just unbelievable. Susquehanna. I cannot find the Columbia Generating Station. Oh, maybe it's this one, Columbia, 2002. There's 27 of them, and they're welded also. And they are 14 years old in 2016, so that means that they are also 17 years old. Oh my goodness. So that's really bad. The source of this information comes from the Department of Energy IAEA inventory of commercial power and independent spent fuel installations. So that's where it comes from. Fuel assemblies per canister in each one. Yeah, there's, for goodness sakes, let's see how many we have at the Columbia Generating Station. Per canister, we have 68 fuel assemblies at each canister, and we have 27 canisters that are welded shut, and they're 17 years old. And we know that they're going to leak at 20 years old. So in 3 years, the Columbia Generating Station's nuclear canisters for sure will start leaking, unless we move them into thicker canisters before then. Do you think they're going to want to spend the money on that? Yeah, that's what I thought too. Probably not, my dears. So, there's a few more stories I want to share with you. But more than just the stories, I encourage people to just put a tag in on your Google search for nuclear in the news section so that you can be aware of it. And it's not just to be aware of it. Like, what I want us to do is call up our elected officials and poke them all the time. I mean, I want us to tell our elected officials that we want to shut down all nuclear power plants in this country. That all the uranium mines need to be capped instead of being allowed to be open, wide open, gouging holes in the earth, that they just pour salt around the perimeter so that the contents don't spill out into the rivers. That's their solution, folks. I mean, it is really kind of beyond comprehension. So, did I want to have this kind of a thing? No. But ever since I found out about Fukushima and discovered that they really, really, don't tell us the truth about nuclear pollution. They don't tell us the truth about where we're contaminated or what contaminants. Like, they don't even test for plutonium anymore. Check this out. In fact, not only that, they will manipulate and lie to us in ways that is just beyond comprehension. Where was it? Oh my gosh, I stopped. false statement. Oh man, I think I threw it away. I got really mad. Oh yeah, here it is. The World Nuclear Association. They're talking about myths. They went to this page and it's called Radioactive Waste, Myths and Realities. And one of the concerns is about plutonium. Okay? Plutonium is the most dangerous material in the world. Listen to this. This is hilarious. Plutonium has been stated to be the most toxic substance on Earth and is so hazardous a speck can kill. Comparisons between toxic substances are not straightforward. The effect of plutonium inhalation would be to increase the probability of a cancer developing in several years' time, whilst most other strong toxins can lead to immediate death. Best comparisons indicate that gram for gram toxins such as ricin, some snake venom, cyanide, and even caffeine are significantly more toxic than plutonium. Nevertheless, plutonium is toxic and therefore must be handled in a responsible manner. Its hazard is principally associated with ionizing radiation it emits. However, it is primarily hazardous if inhaled in small particles. That is a complete lie. It's not primarily hazardous if it's inhaled in small particles. You get yourself around plutonium, a large amount of plutonium, and you are dead very quickly. It is outrageous the way they manipulate and lie about these things. And I think that's the thing that keeps me going and keep reporting on this. I mean, at what point do we just refuse to continue to be gaslit? It's unconscionable. So some of you may know, and this is the final story I'm going to bring you this evening. Some of you may know this, that up in Washington in the last year in the 2016 election, they passed a law that said the workers at Hanford automatically should get paid if they're sick. Like, we need to pay the people who work at the Hanford site to get sick. When they get sick, we need to pay for their illnesses instead of deny. Historically, when people get sick at Hanford, they have to go to court in order to have the government or the contractor that they work for pay for their medical bills. So this is a story from the Tri-City Herald, and it is by Annette Carey, who is an awesome writer, and she's done great work covering Hanford. The title says, Feds ask why some people at Hanford should be compensated for illness and not others. A decision could come within 2 weeks on whether the state of Washington is within its rights to make it significantly easier for most of the employees at the federal Hanford Nuclear Reservation to get paid workers' compensation. U.S. Judge Stanley Bastian heard arguments in Yakima Federal Court this week after the Department of Justice filed a lawsuit to have a new state law overturned. He said he planned to rule quickly, possibly in less than 2 weeks. Both the state of Washington and the U.S. Department of Justice have agreed to let his decision stand on whether a new state law for Hanford workers violates the U.S. Constitution without proceeding to trial. So you get what that means. That means, like, however this judge decides, the DOE says they'll honor it. How long do you think that's going to last? I don't think if they might accept it for a year, but after they have to pay 2 or 3 people, they're going to go, wait a minute. You know, I mean, these people's treatments is in the millions because we have healthcare for profit. It's a ridiculous situation we have in our country. Let me continue with this story. The law that took effect almost a year ago requires the Washington State Department of Labor and Industries to presume that radiological or chemical exposures at Hanford caused any cases of neurological diseases or respiratory illnesses for which past or current contractor workers file claims. Many types of cancer are also presumed to be caused by working at Hanford, plus some limited heart problems. Workers need only be employed at a Hanford work area for a single 8-hour shift to qualify for the eased compensation rules. Most other workers in the state bear the burden of proof to show that their primary injury or illness was a direct result of the specific workplace incident to receive workers' comp. Lawsuit says claims impossible to refute. The Department of Energy may make a case for that factors such as smoking or a person's lifestyle contributed to an illness, but proving that Hanford did not cause an illness would be nearly impossible, argued Christopher Healy, Justice Department attorney. The Justice Department said in court documents that the list of covered illnesses is so loosely defined that it could cover hundreds of common illnesses, such as asthma, chronic bronchitis, Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's, and strokes, all of which is caused by nuclear contamination. That was me saying that comment. Please do read John Goffman's books. They were written in the 60s, the 50s, 60s, and 70s. One of his really great books is Poison Power, and he outlines that when they studied this, he and Arthur Tamplin studied the negative effects of radio contamination in the 50s and 60s, they discovered that along with cancers, you get common illnesses like asthma, chronic bronchitis, Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's, strokes, heart disease, schizophrenia. I mean, it causes autoimmune diseases, sterility. So it causes all of that. Let's go back to this story. The argument drew little sympathy from Bastien. The difficulty of proving causation of a worker's illness is exactly what the state is trying to address with the new law, he said. It's next to impossible, particularly given some poor record keeping at Hanford, for a worker to prove that Hanford caused cancer or other illnesses, Bastien said. The federal government is in the position of power at Hanford, maintaining records and holding the responsibility to protect workers, said Anastasia Sandstrom, an assistant attorney general for the state. The Justice Department has argued that the new law violates the Supremacy Clause of the U.S. Constitution by attempting to regulate the federal government and discriminating against it with heightened liability for workers' compensation. Honestly, this makes me spit nails. You would think that our government would honor the workers at Hanford and gladly pay for their workers' comp. Discrimination against the DOE. The State Department of Labor and Industries decides claims, but the Department of Energy is self-insured for workers' compensation at Hanford contractor employees, the majority of the workers at Hanford, and assumes the risk for payment of claims. Okay, I'm going to read that again. The Department of Energy is self-insured for worker compensation for Hanford contractor employees, the majority of workers at Hanford, and assumes the risk for the payment of claims. And that, I hope you understand what that meant. Most of these people are not wage earners. They are subcontractors. And so the government has to assume the risk for the payment of claims. The legislator intended that the Department of Energy to foot the bill, Healy said. It's easy to spend someone else's money. Bastien said repeatedly that if the new law really discriminated against DOE, or if the state could similarly target other workers at high-risk jobs. Healy argued that the new law specifically targeted employees covered by DOE workers' compensation self-insurance and not other workers at Hanford. For instance, it does not cover Washington State Department of Ecology or Department of Health employees assigned to Hanford regulatory or oversight work who routinely spend time at the nuclear reservation. And you know why? That's because they are covered. It also does not cover workers at the U.S. Ecology Site, a disposal site on land leased from DOE by the state of Washington at the center of Hanford by commercial low-level radioactive waste disposal from western states, Healy pointed out. The new law covers Hanford workers who load radioactive waste onto trucks to be shipped to Perma-Fix Northwest just off Hanford, but not the workers who unload the waste at Richland plant, he said. The plant's work includes treating waste of disposal. Sandstrom argued that the state is not obligated to treat everyone the same if it has a rational reason for differing treatment. In this case, the federal contractors at Hanford have a bad record, she said. The new law addresses a legitimate government issue of contractors' poor monitoring of radioactive material and a failure to provide protective gear to workers at Hanford, she said. And as a caveat, they had to fight. They actually had to go to court and fight to get protective gear for the workers at Hanford. It is not just a poor record. They are disgusting. The federal government has conceded that the environmental cleanup at Hanford is unparalleled in complexity and scale, and that there are unique and medical risks compounded with missing information, she said. God dang. Hanford, which covers 580 square miles, was used to produce plutonium for the nation's nuclear weapons program during World War II and the Cold War. It has extensive contamination and has been undergoing cleanup since the end of the Cold War, with remaining cleanup estimated cost to be at least $323 billion. That's with a B. According to DOE, new estimated released in January. Well, you can pretty much double that, folks. The state has also argued that just days after the new law took effect on June 8, 2018, DOE renewed its self-insurance agreement with the state and agreed to follow state regulations. The new workers' compensation law has no statute of limitations, and the federal employees and the federal government estimates that the date it allows, what does that say? The new workers' compensation law has no statute of limitations, and the federal government estimates that to date it allows about 100,000 current and former Hanford employees or their survivors to file claims or refile denied claims. And most claims have been denied. Since the new law took effect, 131 claims have been filed, with 60 allowed and 20 rejected by the Department of Labor and Industries. The rest were pending as of mid-May. Hanford workers and their survivors may also apply for a federal compensation program administered by the U.S. Department of Labor. It has paid out almost $2 billion in compensation and medical care reimbursement to Hanford and Pacific Northwest laboratory workers or their families. Workers can learn more about the state and federal compensation program and how to apply for them at the Hanford Workforce Engagement Center at 309 Bradley Boulevard, Suite 120 in Richland. The center can be reached at 509-376-4932. And that is Annette Carey. That's actually a pretty awesome story. I am blown away, though, that our government continues to fight with people about this. It's just beyond comprehension. I mean, how do you not stay engaged on that? I mean, I don't know what makes me kind of the odd duck, but to me, these kinds of stories motivate me. They make me want to call Pete DeFazio. They make me want to call my state senator, Manning, my state representative, Nathanson, the governor, Governor Brown. I want Columbia Generating Station shut down, and we need to stop messing around in Hanford. We need to get serious about the nuclear waste cleanup and remediation. You're not going to clean up nuclear waste. The best we can do is remediate the land, but we're not cleaning up. It's like you're taking one toxic to another area. I mean, they're just covering it up with dirt. I mean, they're not really cleaning it up. You can't clean it up, folks. The half-life of plutonium is 24,500 years. I've talked to several people up there who have worked up there. They see double-headed animals all the time. You know, think about the bees. Mimi Gurman from No Nukes Northwest used to talk about this all the time. And Heidi Lambert. Think about the bees and the birds. They're out there, they're drinking the water, they're going through it. They're so full of contamination. I mean, this is a grotesque error that was made in World War II. They have the Manhattan Project literally has destroyed the Columbia Basin with nuclear contamination, the Columbia River. Literally has destroyed the Missouri River, because in St. Louis at Mallinckrodt, they had over 200,000 tons of uranium, pure uranium, buried there for over 20 years, and people couldn't figure out why they got sick. And then it took them 10 years to move it, and then they illegally sold some, and now it's on fire at the Westlake landfill, which nobody ever hears about, but there's 300,000 people living within 5 miles of the Westlake landfill outside of St. Louis, right next to the airport. It smells like the daylights because it's a landfill, and it's on fire with nuclear contamination. Super high cancer rates, super high rates of illnesses from all of their families. The Niagara Falls has been found to have nuclear contamination from the Manhattan Project just thrown at the bottom of the nuclear at the falls. I mean, these are atrocities throughout our country that need to be exposed and discussed, and people need to embrace it instead of running away from it, because we're not going to run away from it. It's coming towards us. It's coming to your children now. You know, I think my own granddaughter's been affected by nuclear contamination, to tell you the truth. She has this odd kind of autoimmune disease. It doesn't affect her very often, but she gets like this little eye infection every once in a while. That's kind of a weird thing. And the doctor was like, yeah, it's just like a very rare eye infection. It's not harmful, but it's a little irritating. It'll go away after a few months. It does. And what causes it, they can't tell. How annoying is that? So this is why I say we got to put our courage feet on. So I am going to do that. I want to thank everybody who's been listening to us. You've been listening to Lonnie Clark with the Age of Fission radio show. This is going to be playing on KEPW.org, www.kepw.org, live streaming, or 97.3 FM LP here in Eugene and Springfield. Thanks for joining us, and we will talk to you guys soon. Age of Fission radio show. Please like, subscribe, and share on Spreaker.com or on the YouTube channel Nuts for Art, NUTZFORART. Send all comments and ideas to Lonnie Clark at ageoffission@gmail.com. We urge all, especially scientists and politicians, to follow the words of our beloved American icon, Mark Twain. Always do right. This will gratify some and astonish the rest.